Good morning, everyone. We'll call the meeting to order. Council is conducting this meeting in person and via conference call in accordance with the Municipal Government Act, Section 199. Council chambers is open for public attendance. However, councillors and members of the public may still join meetings remotely using our teleconference process. If you've submitted a comment request that has been received by administration, the chair will call on you at the appropriate time. If the meeting is recessed, callers will be put on hold until the meeting reconvenes, with the exception at noon where callers will be asked to call back in. This helps with call quality. Please note this meeting is being recorded and may be uploaded to our website and/or social media. To eliminate background noise, please mute your phone during the meeting. We also ask all attendees to mute their devices to reduce disruptions to the meeting. Everyone has a right to be present at council meetings and council committee meetings. Any attendees that are considered disruptive to the progression of this meeting may be removed at the discretion of the chair as per the Municipal Government Act, Section 198. We thank you for your cooperation and understanding. We have an agenda before us. Does anybody have any additions or changes? I will also just ask, as per our procedure bylaw, if any councillors wish to provide a notice of motion for a future council meeting. Not hearing any. Looking for a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
I will so move. Oh, sorry. Sorry, Shannon.
Councillor Laprise.
I'll move the agenda as presented.
Any questions or discussion? I'll call the question.
Don't scare us.
Motion is carried. And we have the minutes from our May 7th regular council meeting. Did anybody see any errors or omissions? Motion to approve is presented. Deputy Reeve Clausen.
I'll make the motion to move the minutes of May 7th, 2024 as presented.
Thank you, Deputy Reeve Clausen. Any questions or discussion? I'll call the question. Motion is carried. We also had the minutes from the Public Presentation Committee meeting on May 14th. Any errors or omissions in those?
I'll move the minutes as presented.
Thank you, Councillor Kester. Any questions or discussion? I'll call the question. Motion is carried. We also had the minutes from the Committee of the Whole meeting from May 14th. Any errors or omissions? A motion to approve is presented.
Also move.
Any questions or discussion? I'll call the question. Motion is carried. We'll move to agenda item 2.1, noise bylaw. Good morning.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of council. Chris Perman, Manager of Protective Services here to present bylaw 2024-12, the noise bylaw. Purpose of the bylaws we've received over the last little while, we've been getting more and more complaints regarding noise. We've had events happen throughout the county, and the bylaw as it stood didn't offer some tools that would have been required to allow for enforcement to happen at the time and to be able to put a stop to something that was happening at a time. So therefore, we took it upon ourselves as administration and brought forth to a committee of the whole meeting draft new noise bylaw that would hopefully clear up some of these things, some things such as clearing up what noise offenses and how to obtain evidence for court, clarifying what steps are taken to keep noise reasonable level, establishing time limits on when construction noise, and then enabling a peace officer to direct an individual or party to abate objectionable noise or to immediately cease it. The goal of the bylaw is to strike a balance, allowing community to enjoy property without being unreasonably disturbed by noise, but also respecting others' activities within reason. Noise perception can be subjective, and of course, the source of the noise, being it from a residential or commercial area, must be considered. Having a bylaw that covers absolutely everything is very complex, so court definitions and court discretion are broad to determine what considers a nuisance noise. And then affected individuals would be required to provide evidence in court if it ever got to that. It got that because case law does say that officers cannot be disturbed by noise. We can only corroborate what we hear, and in a lot of cases, we don't hear it. We're not present when it happens. It could be coming in afterwards, and so on and so forth. So some of the various changes, as noted here in the chart, are to removing the opinion of a peace officer. Again, it's determined that we can only provide evidence rather than opinion. Only a court can actually provide and determine whether the noise is objectionable or not. Adding elements of the offense that would be taken into consideration, so time of day, nature, event, elements of the offense that are necessary to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the noise is objectionable. Directs that permitted activity should take the necessary steps to ensure that noise created is kept at a reasonable level. So there are obviously permitted activities, and when it's permitted, like allowable activities that do create noise. However, it's the onus is on the person that's creating the noise to make sure it stays at a reasonable level. Construction noise is time limits. So obviously stopping it from having too early in the morning, too late in the evening. Prohibiting advertising by noise. Directing that noise can be abated or ceased immediately. There was nothing in the former bylaw. I don't know if it was an omission or objective. I don't recall, but we need to get that back in there. Setting out primary evidence for prosecution. And then distinct exemptions to the bylaw and setting out what the bylaw is not intended to prevent. And then in section 6, the main change was to adding noise bylaw because we just had a bylaw exemption permit. So felt it would be better for us to just actually clarify that it is a noise bylaw exemption permit that somebody's applying for, not just a bylaw exemption permit. So that is all I have for my presentation. So I'm free to answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions regarding the report or the proposed bylaw?
I think you've done a great job in not filling the holes that we had in the bylaw previously. So with that, I'll move that council moves first reading of bylaw 2024-12, the noise bylaw, being a bylaw of Wheatland County enacted to protect, preserve, and promote the safety, health, welfare, peace, and quiet of residents of the county.
Thank you, Councillor Laprise. Any questions or discussion on the motion? I'll call the question.
I'm sorry, I screwed up here, people. Something happened.
Take your
This will
time.
take a minute. It'll take more than a minute. Sorry about that.
No worries. Motion is carried. We'll move to second reading.
I'll move that council move second reading on bylaw 2024-12.
Thank you, Councillor Bigger. Any questions or discussion? I'll call the question. Motion is carried. Deputy Reeve Clausen.
I'll move that council grants permission to hold third and final reading of bylaw 2024-12.
Thank you, Deputy Reeve Clausen. Any questions or discussion? I'll call the question. Motion is carried unanimously. And third reading. Thank you, Councillor Custer. Any questions or discussion? I'll call the question. Motion is carried. Thank you for your work on the bylaw. We appreciate the updates and that we have a more effective bylaw now. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, and thank you for your time today. Take care.
We have a 9:15 schedule for the notice of motion. Is council comfortable doing that now, or would you like to move to 2.32? Does anyone object?
No objection here.
To stick with 9:15?
We can start right now. It's 2 minutes, so.
1 minute, well,
1
depending
minute
on what
now. Yeah,
clock I look at.
yeah.
Okay. Oh, wow. Okay, well, I started the meeting based on this one. Let's just open it. It will certainly be continuing at 9:15. So we had a notice of motion to reconsider Resolution CM 2024-0419. And as per our procedure by law for a motion to reconsider, we will resume a debate from the previous meeting. I'll open the floor.
Just through the REVA appointment procedure. So section 174, I'm just going to read it from the procedure bylaw. It's on page 44 of your agenda package. So if a motion to reconsider is moved during the same meeting, which is not, which is fine, at which the original motion was voted on and is passed, the original motion is back on the floor as if the original mover of the motion had just made the motion. So administration's interpretation of that is that you would need a motion for reconsider, like the motion should be that it would be Councillor Kessler that would move it because he's doing the motion to reconsider. A motion to reconsider the motion in here, which would be CM 2024-04-19. And then council should vote on that motion. And then if that motion passes, then council should reconsider that motion. Thank you.
Thank you for the clarification on the procedure. So Councillor Kester, we would be looking for the motion that you made a notice of motion for.
Okay, I move that council reconsider resolution CM 2024-04-19.
do we need to read the entire motion?
So I think that the motion would be reflected in the minutes, the whole motion that is done on the screen on page 43. But if council can read it, they would probably just save the time of actually reading that motion.
Want me to read it out?
But whatever council thinks, if council sees that motion and understands that motion, then
It was in the package, so I think
You want me to read it?
I don't think we need to read the whole thing. It was in the package and everybody has a copy of it. It's also up on our screens and on the screen for the public.
Mhm.
So Councillor Kester has moved to reconsider Resolution CM 2024-0419. I will open the floor to questions or debate. Councillor Kester.
There's some background to the motion and why I want it reconsidered. Last month, last 3 weeks, we've had a busy time. On April 30th, Dr. McNeely had a meeting with the ADM at Alberta Health. On May the 1st, Dr. McNeely, Mayor Pat Fuel, and myself had a meeting with David Williams. He's the ADM. Minister Jeremy Nixon, Jason Nixon, a Minister of Seniors, and MLA Chantal Giron. During this meeting, the minister was extremely interested in hospice as part of the lodge. He thought it was a good deal. He's a strong rural supporter. He said our application for the new lodge was a very strong application, but they didn't have enough money the first go around. He said all future projects need to be in the ground, shovels in the ground in 4 to 6 months. And he's seen CMHC as a holdup to the getting shovels in the ground. He says sometimes it takes them 6 months to a year to get their approval. And he also said there's a strong possibility of summer funding for a couple projects. They might be coming into some money. And he offered staff to debrief our application. And then, as I forgot to mention, as part of the CMHC, he would supply a letter of support from the ministry to CMHC. On May the 6th, we took up Minister Nixon on his offer to debrief, and we had a meeting with Erica Washington. She's the Executive Director of Capital Planning, and Robert Craig, Capital Planning. Right off the bat, they said it was a very strong application. Our strengths: we have 50 years of affordability and strong experience. 120 units and 6 hospice, they seen as a strength. The 120 beds is within the range of a sweet spot for operating a building of this size for staffing requirements. They said our rental units were compliant. Existing contributions of land, federal and provincial contributions were all seemed to be in order. Another strength was our 2019 needs assessment, and design and zoning seemed to be coming along. Our weaknesses were we should provide a letter of why we are reevaluating the cost per unit. In the original application, the original selection for funding, the government had $86,000 per door as, I think roughly, don't quote me here, plus or minus, how's that? And we are asking for $188,000 a door. We did that because Meridian in the first go around received $188,000 a door because this funding is for supportive living and it's not basically just for lodges. Lodges are the anomaly, and the lodges are more expensive to build. The rooms are smaller, but we have common dining areas and kitchens and meeting rooms and staff rooms and offices, so makes it a little more money. She also said a Class B and a Class A budget will give us more points. In regards to points, when they look at our application, they have 2 steps. Step 1 is to see that we're compliant. They go through our application and make sure we have every line, every I dotted, every T crossed, and we have the appropriate information. We passed the step 1. Step 2, they add points for every line that we fill in. So if we're bare minimum, I don't know how they were out at the points. They said they would not tell us. They would not tell us how many points we have. They wouldn't tell us how many our neighbors had. But they award points, and that's how they award the project. So if we had a Class B and a Class A, would give us more points. So currently we do have a Class B. And get CMHC support for funds. So they also said our application didn't make it through the first round, but our application is still in for the next rounds. They didn't take it out. It is still active. But we can add to it, and we're encouraged to add to it whenever our information becomes available. So the application is still in. On May 16th, we met with Alicia Magwood. She was from CMHC. That was the building committee from WHMB. She said, we have met, or we have most of the needed documents, as Derek is seeking seed money. When we started the project, CMHC had seed money, then they run out. They have seed money available again. He's applying for it. He's, I don't know if he's been successful, I haven't heard. But part of the documents to get the seed money are the same documents we need for the mortgage. She also said that Derek knows the system. He's one of the best, and he's well liked in CMHC. So having what we have already submitted, and the person that we have doing it, she said there should be no trouble turning it around in 30 to 90 days when they have an amount and the time of provincial funding. She said it'd be likely around the 60-day mark, as because most of our applications are in. So all our meetings were very positive. We've got a good application in, we can add to it, we can make it better, and any monies we spend making it better have to be spent once we're approved in any rate. I know it's a risk not getting approved, but the minister saying he would provide a letter of support, offered up his staff to debrief. I think they were all positive things. So here comes the crux of the meeting. May 15th, David Williams, ADM of Housing Division, Alberta Seniors, and Dean Lucer, Executive Director, Seniors and Housing, met with Vicky, Crystal, and Brian, our CIO. It was in regards to the letter the county has been sending Minister Nixon. One of the topics that come up, and I'll let Brian, I don't want to steal all this talk, but one of the talks that came up was the new lodge. It says, while we have a strong application, everyone, all the partners, has to agree and support the new build. Dean Lucer went as far as saying letters of support do not contain conditions, or they're not a letter of support. It's like saying sorry, but. And if we can't agree, our chances of success have greatly diminished. So after our last board meeting, it was emotional, to say the least. Got a letter. I'd like to read it. Come from one of the board members. After our last meeting, I was very impressed with CAO Cook's and Wheatland Housing Resident Manager Christie's Swarak reports to the board. They always provide fulsome reports, but on the occasion of our last meeting, the reports were also narratives. It led me to think about other information relevant to our current seniors housing situation, of which Wheatland Housing Management Board members may not be aware. I also sit on the board of Strathmore Overnight Shelter, SOS. As Christie was addressing the skepticism articulated by people without thorough knowledge of the housing crisis among local seniors, it made me realize that many who do not know the existing reality in our community would not know about the issues faced every day at SOS either. So the skepticism that Christie was talking about was there's rumors going around that we aren't full at the lodge and we don't have a waiting list. She says anything, it is the furthest from the truth that you can be. She says she currently places quite a few people into Bazzano, and into Vulcan seems to be some easier ones, but she's got her ears open for the whole of the province. And the people that move there are moving out of their home, and they also try and keep an application open here for when people come. The letter continues. For the past 5 years, I've compiled demographic data sets for SOS. A significant portion of our population is seniors. Over COVID, when we initially began to experience significant numbers of seniors accessing overnight shelter at SOS, we were most often able to access appropriate housing for them within 3 months. It was easier to access housing for seniors than for other populations. Seniors who needed SOS accommodation most often had lost their housing because they had been living with adult children who lost employment over COVID and can no longer afford to support their aging parents. Today, seniors who reside at SOS have lost housing due to unaffordable arrangements where they have been residing previously. At SOS, we are no longer able to permanently house seniors quickly within 3 months or efficiently. We have formed relationships with several other seniors lodges across the province, as our local seniors cannot usually access housing nearby. While this has helped a bit, finding adequate space anywhere has been extremely challenging. Recently, we have come to arrangements with some hotels to house seniors temporarily at a cost slightly below the minimum charged by WHMB. This cost, very reasonable by hotel standards, does not include meals or laundry, let alone other services necessary to senior well-being. So the burden on these seniors is much greater. With preferential to overnight shelter where seniors with health issues and mobility issues have to fend for themselves during the day, it is still far from sufficient. When these hotels have proximity to SOS volunteers, endeavor to pick up their laundry and deliver food. There is a misconception that SOS houses large numbers of Siksika residents. SOS does accommodate Siksika, but the nation has their own shelter, so most often accommodation is for one overnight stay, until they can return home. I've also had people say that the situation faced by this population is of their own doing, as they did not adequately plan for their retirement. This is an uninformed assumption. The seniors I have met in SOS worked their entire lives. Some were stay-at-home mothers who never worked outside their home and so had no top-up retirement income. Some were farm laborers who did not have pensionable service. Some have cognitive and health-related issues. As such, every single person has a story. The bigger narrative is this is the addendum to the critical housing shortage for our seniors. These are not persons from far away. These are, for the most part, our people from our own community. Most could and should be accommodated in affordable congregate living. For those of us aware of the profound need, seeing excessive and needless delay, embedded in endless requests for more information, even though the experts engaged have a proven record of excellence in meeting and exceeding standards in a congregate care, is heartbreaking. For those in dire need, it is devastating every single day. For those striving to mitigate the shortage of affordable, safe accommodation, it is deeply frustrating and distressing. I am pleading for understanding, compassion, and reason. The plan we have is good. The work completed up to now is sound, affordable, and sustainable. Thank you for listening. Denise Peterson. So that's what's led up to this motion, and in front of you, you have the motion with all the conditions. The first condition, letter of support. The minister is never going to write us a letter of support with an amount of money and a date stamped to it. It just won't happen. The other requests are, well, you see them in front of you. And as far an earlier motion of support, the one that Dean Luster was speaking to, is a letter of support that all the municipalities, and it's pretty much the same letter. Everybody wrote it. I don't know if anyone, you want me to read it, or I didn't pass it out to everyone. It was April 18th, 2023. It was a letter of support that was written to Affordable Housing Project Program, Proposed Housing Project, Wheatland, and the Government of Alberta, and I think to CMHC, I'm thinking too. Anyway, all the municipalities wrote one. 2 municipalities added an addendum, which is this one here, Wheatland County did, and the town of Strathmore. For the most part, this addendum lists out how much money all the municipalities owe, right? I think you all remember it. So the first, right off the bat, HPP is $7 million. We're hoping for 18 million with the new thing. But the crux of it is, and I mentioned it at the time, this is, we can't achieve it because the annualized equalized assessment changes every year. The percentages change every year, who pays what. And we don't know what the final mortgage is. We're still shooting for the 700,000. We're still on track. So I would move that we strike resolution CM.
Just a point of order, Councillor Custer. I believe we already have the motion displayed on the screen. You've already moved to reconsider
Yeah.
Resolution 2024-0419. We have a motion on the floor.
That's right. So I would amend the motion then, that we strike everything that's in it.
Just through the chair, the correct process would be to vote on the motion to reconsider, and then the motion, if the motion to reconsider passes, then the original motion comes back on the floor, and that's up for debate. So the motion to reconsider needs to be passed first if council chooses to hear this motion again, and then after that is passed, then the initial motion does come back on the floor.
Okay.
Thank you to administration.
Would care ask for a recorded vote?
Certainly. Open the floor to other questions or discussion.
Do you mind if I get a cup of coffee?
Sure. Any other questions or discussion?
I've got a question for Councillor Kester. At one of the meetings, I think the May 6th meeting, you mentioned that there was going to be, they've moved the, approved the $188,000 per door. You mentioned $188,000 per door. That's the new funding.
Meridian Housing was successful in getting their lodge approved in the first go around, and that's what they received.
So
Because the funding for lodges is more. So lodges, and I believe the province has come to the acknowledgement that that's what the third would be, the $188,000 per door.
well, that would mean that at $188,000 a door times 126 doors, that's $23.7 million. Is that a new ask that we're asking, that the board is asking the province to pay for?
I think the application is about 18 million, but we can change it because of inflation and stuff. I'm not 100% sure, Tom. I don't know I do have the pro forma here. I don't know if it's listed in there. It works out to 1/3 of the cost. Municipalities were to pay 1/3, and we borrow the rest. We are going to ask the most that we can from the provincial government, let's put it that way.
Councillor Laverson.
The point of that meeting was that we did not provide a reasoning for why the funding was more than 85,000, and they were very clear that all we need to do is provide a reasoning for the funding. They understood why it had to happen. We just had to provide a reason for it, and then that would solve the problem. So I'm not just 100% sure what your question is here.
So I won't be voting for the deal. The main reason is I've gone through all the AHPP stuff, and there's nothing that shows that you need anything more than a Class C, a Class B being preferable. You provided a Class B. As I understand it, Vulcan has got seed money. I don't know if this is publicly known yet. And they did it with the Class C. They have since completed a Class B, but they have not submitted that Class B, and they've got seed funding for their lodge. So I believe that we have enough information out there. I believe the board has done a wonderful job presenting the deal, but I believe that spending $1.4 million on stamped construction drawings is a waste of time at this time. If, on the county's share alone, if we just leave that money in the bank and don't spend it, that's $4.6 thousand a year interest that I know we can use that money for. That basically works out to, you could pay my salary every month for the, while we're waiting for this, for the province to make a decision on this. So I cannot see why we need construction-ready stamped engineering drawings to push this forward. I cannot find out anywhere on any of the information from AHPP that they require more than a Class B, and that's been provided. So I will be voting against this. I do not want to spend money on drawings that could become shelf art.
Councillor Kester.
You're right, you only need a Class A for HPP.
B.
Need a,
B, Class B.
yeah. And Alberta Housing and Mortgage, to get there, okay, we need a Class A. That's where the discrepancy is. Alberta Housing and Mortgage will start the application with a Class B as long as it's understood we're working for a Class A. So today, for the $1.4 million isn't nearly as important as a, shall we call it, a clean letter of support. That is our most important thing. We don't absolutely have to have a Class A. It just provides more points when we're getting selected at the HPP process. They give us more points and maybe we get more. That's just, I know it's vague, but it's as vague as the minister was when he told us. It's the points that count at the end of the day. So we get a major deduction for our letter of supports. We have two. We have Wheatland County we need working on, and we have Town of Strathmore. We can submit with what we have. We have a Class B now, which is better than the Class C. So we've added a few points there, which is good. We could go for Class A. Remember when I told you the minister wants projects in the ground in 4 to 6 months? It would take us, if everything goes smoothly and we can get our team back together, 6 months to get construction-ready documents, I was told. If it takes us a month to get the team together, it pushes it back. 2 months for the Class A, 4 months for construction-ready drawings.
Can you just say that one more time?
Takes about 2 months to get a Class A and about 4 months to get construction drawings, which is 6 months out. Alberta CMHC has said they can turn their application around in 90 days as long as we get our Class A. We can work in tandem with that. There's no problem with that. So as far as spending money, it's not absolutely necessary, but it can cut some time off for us on the 6 months. I don't know what else to say.
Councillor Laprise and then Councillor Bigger.
I guess a couple things. So about the timeline of Class A and the construction drawings, my understanding is they work in tandem, like they work at the same time. So really, I saw the timeline that looked like it would all happen within 4 months. That one doesn't happen and then the next one starts. Like they should all be happening at the same time. The budget is driven by the construction drawings.
Right. So to get in the ground in 6 months, we have to do the Class A, the construction drawings, and then we come up with a new budget. We take that drawings and that budget and we prepare it to go to tender. And then the tender process takes about 4 months to get it into the ground. So you're absolutely right, they go together, but we don't get in the ground for another 4 months, I was told, because it takes that long to get the tender documents done and actually get a shovel in the ground.
And so I had another just question, I guess, about, so you want to reconsider this resolution, but now you're kind of suggesting that something else is required. A new letter of support, I guess, that doesn't have any conditions on it. But
If we could
so is that,
make me happiest the most, is reaffirm our original letter of support without attaching the resolution to it. This letter here would make us the same as everyone else. And we can present that to the government. I think that would give us more points than anything. In this letter, it says we're all partners. We're all going to pay our share of the assessment. So the problem with putting numbers in it, they change yearly. Our notice of our equalized assessment, if somebody builds a house in Hazard, it changes everybody's percentage. Not much, but it does. If we lose some more linear, ours goes down. We lost 1% here over the 2 years ago. We pay 1% less. If Strathmore grows bigger, they get a bigger share. It changes every year. The thing of it is, it just needs by our share as defined by the annual equalized assessment. And that number is, just for a little history, on the 700,000, when we first started, we had our very first pro forma. It come to about $700,000 per year for all the municipalities for their share of the new lot. The latest pro forma is still $700,000 for the share of all the municipalities. I think we started out at 50 years. I think we're down to 35 years of paying. The original plan has been changed greatly. There's no longer a basement in it. It's all a slab. It is not cast in place. It is precast concrete. There is the precast concrete, while in itself is more expensive, but the time in constructing it at site is can be up to 6 months shorter time frame. And that's where we save the money. We've changed the rooms. We've just made it so we were still compliant with AHPP, and we were compliant with our original pro forma of 700,000. We did not cross that line of 700,000, and we did not cross any conditions that the Alberta government put on us. The only thing we can do is change the structure of the building. The Alberta government gave us a range of rent compliance, and we're within ranges. One of the considerations for us to be on our original plan, we had 3 categories of rent. And when it was a problem for the precast system to build smaller rooms, the hallways got gigantic. All they did was push the wall back, made the room smaller. Had a huge hallway. At the end, it wasn't even like it was at the beginning. It would have been a little more useful. So the board made the decision that it costs more money to build that extra category of room than to keep them all the same. So we kept them all the same. But the rooms and the filling of the lodge is a management decision. They have targets they have to reach, and they have to provide people to live in the lodge. And they'll move people in, and they'll move them around as conditions change. So some of these rooms that should have been cheaper could have a crappy scenery outside their window, or it could be the end of the hallway where nobody wants to be, or whatever the considerations are. But that is a staffing thing. And I guess two other comments that I've not said before. Alberta government in their last budget increased the LAP grant. I don't have how much, but I heard it was 50%, which is huge in the continuation of our lodges. And I just heard this morning on the news that the city of Calgary is putting together, I don't know if it's a task force or something, for this housing crisis, especially for the seniors. They, as for your information, I'm sure some probably know it already, I believe Silvera in the city of Calgary a few months ago drastically increased their rents, and a lot of seniors had to move out. They couldn't afford it. Silvera gave up their contract with the government. And a lot of these seniors, they did find some homeless walking around the streets. So it's just not our locale. We're in a busy hub of the province. And as stated in that letter, we never had a homeless shelter here till COVID come. And now people are living in there for months trying to find a place to live. We need these old houses.
Councillor Bigger.
Just for one, I don't have that letter. Is that something everybody has, or no?
It's our original letter of support that was sent a year ago. So
Okay.
yes, probably would have been good to provide copies to everybody so that we all know.
Okay.
Want me to read it, Donna, or do you want to have it in your hand?
I think right now we need to stay focused.
Yeah.
Our current consideration is
I just thought maybe I
reconsidering
missed it in handout
the letter that Councillor
that they were talking about, yeah.
Kester
But the
read.
other letter of support that we did have conditions on, I do want to say one thing. I do feel it was some of it was to make sure that the province does come to the table. You know, this isn't our wheelhouse, that we need them to come to the table. And that's was a lot of the purpose of that letter of support with conditions. It was for the provinces to come to the table with us to make sure it does happen. Another thing I want to say about, I too don't believe we need a Class A. We can talk about support, but there has been, like, we need to strengthen this partnership somehow, and I don't know how that can be done. There's a lot of well, maybe you keep saying that's misinformation, but it's been better since the last little while of getting more information to us. It's hard to sit in a seat when you've got talking millions of dollars and You need the information and you need to share it. I know you guys feel you shouldn't share it, but it is important that all partners get to share that. And we need to work on that partnership for sure. There is, trust issues, I don't really like some of the tactics that have been used. So I do believe that partnership is an important going forward on this. Just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Deputy Reeve Clausen and then Councillor Kester.
Thank you. Every time this comes up, there's more information that comes up, which is kind of, I think, what we're all kind of learning here. And it would be nice if it was all set straight, but we're learning as we go. So the motion of support that we had, the letter of support that we had a year ago, I just want to be very clear. The town of Strathmore had theirs probably a month before ours, and they had the exact same conditions in theirs. So I don't understand why all of a sudden it's changed. I mean, the two major partners have pretty much the same. And from what I've seen from the town's agenda and their meetings, they have not changed that. That was put in, I believe, by administration to probably protect and be able to plan for budgeting, which is what we should be doing. I understand that some numbers can change, but there has been a letter of support here for quite some time. And I've said before, and I'll say it again, if the province had stepped to the plate, we would not be having this conversation right now. This project would be going forward because we've all supported that. So it's really hard to ask for more for me right at this time, because I feel that we've had a solid application based on information at the time, the needs assessment, all that thing. Everything's in the hands of a government body that isn't here. We've had an MLA sit here and tell us we're going to get some information that we did not get. We've had it several times, and they are the ones that if they're not at the table, this project will not move forward. So we've jumped through the application process. We've given them everything that they needed at the time, even a little better, I guess, for Class Bs now. So to go to full construction drawings without the major partner being there, to me, is not at this time. We've said when this came to us, we could always park it at any time. That was said in several meetings. There was off ramps. It's not an off ramp. To me, it's parking it until the province makes their decision. If that takes them a year, I don't know. I have no idea what the ministry is doing. They have not communicated other than verbally, which I understand. And I've said before, if you have it in writing, that's a totally different thing to me. And if they're not willing to put it in writing, there's a reason why. Because I know when even our letter of support, there's a reason why those conditions were in there. And I stated that. And if it changes, if the numbers change and you want to look at the support numbers and you have to go to the town and to us and give us new updated numbers, I'd be fine with that based on the current budget or whatever. But that's where I sit. Thank you.
Any other questions or discussion? Councillor Kester.
Absolutely agree with Donna. Your board members, Shannon, is trying extremely hard to learn the project. It's frustrating. It's frustrating for all board members because the numbers change because of inflation. The scope changes because of inflation. And like I said, the line in the sand for the funding. We've seen the ministers within the last 3 weeks, personal meetings, Zoom, some of them, and they're telling us we have a strong application. I'm not as worried about the 1.4 as I am the letter of support. The letter of support, the original says you're going to share. It's contingent on HPP. It's contingent on CMHC. Everybody getting along together is in the original letter. The rest is a, I don't know, call it noise, call it clarification, call it a condition. We don't need it. It's in the original letter. It's all said and done. when it comes time to build and the province isn't putting their money in, we won't be building. Unless the counties want to put up $18 million or their share of it. CMHC has to come online. We have a good application. The weakest spot is our letter of support.
Councillor Priest.
So I'm just looking at this motion to reconsider this, and this resolution that we're reconsidering just has to do with forwarding the money ahead of time. But like Councillor Kester has said, it sounds to me like the capital planning group, they've said we have a very strong application, we have 50 years experience, the number of units and having the hospice included is a positive thing. The size of the building is within this range of sweet spot for operating that kind of size of building. The rental unit costs are compatible with their guidelines. The land and the contributions from the various partners is compliant. Our needs assessment is satisfactory. The only weaknesses they came up with was that we just need to say why we're asking more per door than the 86,000 they suggest, and that with a Class B, we would get more points, and we have the Class B. They said to get CMHC support, and we've talked to them, and we basically have their support, right? Derek's already talking to them about seed mining. They've got lots of the documents they already need. I feel like they never said anything about our letter of support. And so if we're just looking at reconsidering this resolution, I don't think we need to.
When I made the notice of motion, and I think when you were contemplating the notice of motion, it's in different circumstances than what we're presented with here today. So I'm using this notice of motion to get it back on the floor and saying, from a personal conversation I wasn't present at, but was reported to the housing board, that one of the executive director said it's extremely important to have a letter of support, no conditions. You're absolutely right. Strathmore has the same conditions. We copied it from them. And I will be talking to Strathmore. We have a motion that everybody on the board has the same letter, trying to get no conditions on it. We're just trying to fulfill what was imparted to us as information. And when you look at the original letter, it doesn't commit you to building a lodge without support from the province or the feds, nor the support from the other municipalities. We're in this all together. It's like that show, The Musketeers, all for one and one for all. We got to get along. It's as simple as that. There's trust issues, whatever the issues are. But we have to have a look. We got 3 municipalities issued a letter of support, and they got no conditions on it. And it probably hurts them more than us. So that's my pleading. I don't know if I'm.
So can I just ask a clarifying question? So by reconsidering this resolution, you're hoping to add or change it entirely so that we're just asking for a new letter of, is that what we're debating here? Yeah.
If council allows that, or if I have to.
Are we debating that, or are we debating?
No.
No.
At this point, we are just debating the motion to reconsider the resolution regarding advancing the $900,000. That's what's currently on the floor. And there is obviously a reason for our procedure bylaw and for the mechanisms in it so that council has comprehensive information when they're considering a decision. That's why the procedure bylaw is structured the way it is. CAO Henderson.
Yes, just a point for clarity through the chair for the rest of council. So the motions to reconsider is section paragraphs 173 and 174, or sorry, 173 to 176 in your agenda, or in the procedure bylaw, but that also is included in your agenda on page 44. So the motion to reconsider, it has to have a motion, so the motion's on the floor now to reconsider that motion, which is good. So council still needs to vote on that if they choose to reconsider the motion or not. And then 174 gets into the exact kind of piece of what council needs should do if this motion passes. So I'll say it now so I don't have to repeat myself later. But the chair would reopen the debate on the original motion, and after the debate is closed, the chair calls for the vote on the original motion. So it's just the original motion that council needs to do. If there are amendments to that motion, or realistically, I think the goal of this for Councillor Kester, I imagine, would be to have this motion reconsidered and have the motion defeated. That would be my understanding. And then at that point, then there is nothing on the books, and then, or nothing on in the minutes showing that this motion was passed. Then at a future meeting or subsequently, another motion needs to be brought forward on the action that needs to be done. If that's the way administration interprets it. So if there are any questions, please let me know, or refer to the procedure bylaw. Thank you.
Thank you, CAO Henderson. Any other questions or discussion? Just a couple of thoughts and questions. I'd like to respond to a couple of comments that were made regarding the comment around needless delay. I do want to just point out the WHMB did not apply to the first AHPP allocation, which obviously caused some delay in the project. And council has responded in an iterative fashion in our decision making as information has become available. And council has made democratic decisions based on the best information that was available at the time. So to read a letter perhaps implying that our council has caused any delays, I think is disingenuous. Following my comments, I would like you just to clarify, I heard you reference municipalities. I didn't catch the exact language, but I believe I heard a reference to municipalities owing or paying 1/3. Regarding, I'd like to just have an outline of the engagement that has been done and the results of that engagement on the new plan for the lodge, both the pricing structure, and there's a lot of changes from what had been done in some of the last engagement that I participated in. So I'm just curious on the results of that engagement. With reference to timing as well, I'm glad to have some more clarity from the Honourable Minister Nixon around that timing, and to hear that just some clarity around the Class A and Class B budget being acknowledged. I think it was really a strong example when he gave that example of RMA, of that one project that took 8 years to get shovels in the ground. And that would, there's obvious reasons why the government would want timeliness in leveraging these funds that they are committing and ensuring that they are serving Albertans in the best possible way. I think we're trying to do the same thing through our council. There was a reference to Silvera drastically increasing the costs of their units. I did hear about that in the news. I haven't dug into that deeply. But one of the reasons I'm curious about the engagement on the new pro forma and the new proposed modeling is that there is a fairly substantial increase to the costs that are being proposed by this project as well. So in a news article, the CAO of WHMB Housing Board was quoted that this was a year ago, so, and I understand that there was a change to the rental rates, I think recently, like just a modest sort of cost of living increase. But I don't have that data, or I didn't look it up. But the current max at the time of this news article was $2,100 a month, with it quoted that the average resident was paying between $1,800 and $2,100 a month. And on our latest pro formas, I see that the rooms range in price from 2,336, and that's, if I understand correctly, 18 units at that rate. Those would be the only rooms, as I understand it, that are LAP grant eligible. Although I'm not sure that on this pro forma, it specified that specifically, but I think that that was my understanding. And that there are 36 rooms that will cost $3,145 a month, which is actually above mean market rental rates. And so there's been not only that significant change in the rental pricing model for the proposed lodge, but also a significant change to the LAP grant eligibility. And I think that ties into that revenue model. And I understand the rationale for doing it. I do still struggle with contemplating, 60-ish million dollars of taxpayers' dollars into capital to build, 36 of those rooms that will charge above market rent for seniors. And then there's a sliding scale. There's 43 that are, it just notes less than 80% of market rate, 23 rooms that are less than 90% market rate. And then the 18 that are less than 60% market rate. From my conversations with people, there's not good understanding of that, and there's some question about the return on that investment of taxpayers' dollars with that rate model. I do understand from that same article, and again, this may have shifted somewhat because I know, residents do change in the lodge. At the time of that report, I will reiterate, there was 56 out of the 95 residents were LAP grant, receiving LAP grant funding. And so I do have serious concerns, particularly given a couple of references that I read in previous materials, just around if the new lodge doesn't fill, there had been, a proposed potential solution to close the previous lodge. I have a serious concern about what would happen to some of those residents that might not be able to afford the new lodge. Regarding the letter of support with conditions, part of the reason that I supported the inclusion of a communication strategy in our original letter of support was that there have been some challenges with the information that has been provided to the public. Our council has been misrepresented and painted in a very negative light, which is unfortunate. And my hope was that the board would step up and commit in good faith to correcting that and to working collaboratively with Wheatland County, the town of Strathmore, and all of the villages. And obviously, I see how important that is. Instead, what I observed was a hostile housing board meeting where autonomy was king and kept, repeatedly being pointed to that there was no need to have the county being, approving communication strategies or communications. That's unfortunate because now we're in this position where things have been exacerbated. I have residents who have been very concerned with some of the actions over the last year, maybe slightly over the last year, 14, 15 months. And I wish that there had been attention to those, and those conditions would have been, or for example, that condition would have been eliminated through a collaborative process. And that was on, Wheatland County put that on the table, and obviously Wheatland Housing Management Body did have the autonomy to do what they wanted with that communication from our council, and here we are. That's unfortunate. Now I think the Housing Board has come to the realization that capital cannot be requisitioned, and they are going to require the support of Wheatland County. And that's going to be very challenging when we've had contradictory information and lack of clarity around things. I want to just really, and I apologize, we really should just be sticking to considering the rationale for reconsidering the motion to advance the $900,000. I will not be supporting that motion based on the fact that and we were well aware of this. The HPP guidelines outlined it clearly and were available to both the board and anyone on this council, that it was clear that a Class A or Class B cost estimate was, as Councillor Eichert pointed out, going above and beyond. And there are multiple factors in preferential consideration, including, you know, a lower lower than 1/3 contribution from the province. There's multiple things. Wheatland Housing Management Body chose to focus solely on that one item around preferential consideration. It's encouraging for me to hear that there's some acknowledgement that that is not the be-all and end-all of advancing this application, that there are far more significant issues regarding this that need to be addressed prior to a significant capital project like this. Councillor Kester.
Sorry. When we did our needs assessment and we were developing our pro forma, the market rent was calculated through surveys in Strathmore area. The incomes as supplied from lines 150 of the residents' tax forms was used in compiling the data, how much they could afford. That's where the prices for the rooms come from. Your consideration that the Wheatland Housing is going to be charging more than the mean rent in the area is absolutely wrong. Some of the rents you're looking at from the housing is including services, which is meals and laundry and whatever else it is. The base rent is 90% of the mean rent of the area. And that's just for some of the rooms that have 1 bedrooms. LAP grant, they apply for the LAP grant, and who qualifies sometimes gets it. Depends on the government if they give it out or not. I can't, just because you're in one size room doesn't mean you get the LAP grant. There's other considerations. And I've always known, and the board's always known, that we can't requisition for capital. The 700,000 is the municipal share, and we all have to agree or it doesn't happen. We can't requisition for capital. The information comes in the form of performas, so you get a complete package. We've had 2-3 meetings at the town of Strathmore where the board has invited all the councils to come. Most of the councils come. I find it disingenuous, to use a favorite word, that everything's blamed on Wheatland Housing. We can't supply numbers on the building until we get a total package together, much as the budget here. When we talk budget here in council, it's in camera if we're going to add this, add that, not this. But when the budget's done, it's public. Ours is public pro forma. It's there. Will it change again? Most definitely. It's inflation. It's been calculated by some. We've lost $2 to $5 million in increased costs. We're not pointing the fingers at Wheatland County. That's inflation. We're living in an inflation time. And the longer we wait, the more it goes up. But the need is increasing ever so fastly. We have people on the streets. I don't know why it is so hard to give a letter of support without conditions. knowing that any project has to be agreed to by all. We can't force anybody to come along and requisition them for capital. It's right in the act. Everyone has to agree. When it's agreed to, the minister signs it. Anyway, I'm still, this motion, when I tabled it and the information we received since hand has changed the focus of the board. The board would be not extremely happy, but if we got a letter of support and leave the money in the bank and pay Tom's wages, that's the way it is. Realizing when HPP comes, we got to have that money and we got to continue on the process.
Councillor Kester, can you just speak to the engagement that's been done with the public on the new modeling for the price, for the rent pricing?
We've not engaged on the new rent pricing for the new lodge that I can think of. I know the prices at the lodge go up every 3 years. And on the other 2 years, the cable and goes up, and another year their parking goes up. So it's a little bit every year. Requisitions for the old lodge are 733,000 and change this year, which is more than the 700,000 for the new. True, there's $300,000 in reserve money, which is direly needed to pay for the roof. We don't have, with the 300,000 when we get it, we would probably have enough to pay for the roof. But an inspector was out looking at our generator and codes have changed on the generator. It needs to be rewired to, if it ain't one thing, it's 14 others. It's an older building and it needs work. If something happens to our fire alarm system, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of dollars, you can't get parts for it, it's outdated, and it needs to be replaced. It's on its last legs.
Thank you, Councillor Kester.
One other comment. There is 5 municipalities, Hazard, Standard, Rockyford, Strathmore, and Wheatland County. 4 of the municipalities are working with us and they don't have problems with asking for questions. We answer them at the board. It's Wheatland County that we're sitting here talking with. You make it sound like we're against everybody. There's 4 municipalities that support 100%.
Thank you, Councillor Kester. It's obviously not our responsibility or fiduciary duty here to support anything 100%. It's our responsibility to ensure that tax dollars are stewarded well. And with that comes asking questions. And it's not within our jurisdiction whether other municipalities are choosing to ask questions or choosing to contemplate information or data or understand assumptions when they are allocating their tax dollars money. That's not within our jurisdiction. Our jurisdiction is Wheatland County ratepayers' tax dollars. And it doesn't have to be antagonistic or oppositional when we ask questions. Data and information can be provided, our administration provide it to us all of the time to make well-reasoned, good questions. I did just mean to speak to one other, there's some emotional information being shared about unhoused folks in our region, and that is truly heartbreaking. I'm not sure that folks who are currently using the services of the overnight shelter will necessarily be able to afford the rental, the modeled renting pricing in the proposed lodge either. Some may, some it may be at an administrative challenge. And sorry, I did find the information on another sheet. It looks like the 36 one-bedroom units, they're not above market rate, but they're at market rate. So they are at that mean market rate. And then yes, there's a service package, which I think would cover operating expenses like the property taxes, insurance, food services, human resources, administration, things like that, and management fees, which would all get integrated into that additional monthly charge that all of the residents would pay. What I did want to reiterate is there was a comment made well, it was some discussion around need and that's being misconstrued. And I just want to reiterate that the information that I pointed to in our last council meeting was taken directly from the November 16th, 2023 Wheatland Housing Management Body Board. And that was where the comments around at the time of the report, most applicants are waiting for specific rooms. They're not interested in moving at this time. Therefore, most ASAP applications have moved in, and the comment, people do not have to wait very long for a room if they are interested. When I sat on the board, that was at times part of our discussion as well, was around the veracity of the wait list and the accuracy of identifying that information in that way. This is critical, even in terms of advancing an additional almost $1 million of tax dollars to this project, because that directly ties to, in my mind, the likelihood of an additional lodge filling and the rate at which it might fill. Now, some of those, if they're looking for a preferential room, for sure, I think that's very valid and they likely will. But it's also about looking at how well we're currently meeting the affordable housing needs of our seniors. And for me, I do have a very sensitive heart, and I wish that we could, provide a lot more services to Albertans. Healthcare is in a crisis. Obviously, housing is an extreme challenge. There's multiple things that different levels of government are responsible for that could use additional funding. We also know that those same challenges, if government were to address them at a level that would remove all of the challenge, would increase taxes to such an extent it would further exacerbate the affordability challenges that are creating some of this need for affordable housing. And we would just be putting more people into that situation where they can no longer afford housing or groceries or medication or things like that. So it is trying to strike a balance. It's trying to steward the finite financial resources of all Albertans in the most careful and strategic way. Anyways, it is frustrating when negative comments are made that are not based on accurate context and history. Councillor Kester.
For starters, there is no property tax on the lodge. Strathmore does not charge property tax. Your numbers for rent in the area are different than ours. I would like you to share them, please. Our information is 90% of the model. Thirdly, as far as being able to afford to be in a lodge, present lodge or the new lodge, if you file a tax return, you can be a recipient of old age security, guaranteed income supplement, GST money, and now the carbon tax for as long as that lasts. That money would be reported on your line 150. When you go in, if you go into the lodge with no line 150, it's pretty hard to get in. So the people there will help you. FCSS will help you file a tax return. And you'll get a lumber on line 150. You'll be the recipient of these money that everybody in Alberta has, if you qualify, you get. That money is put into a formula, and the results of the formula is how much you spend on housing, and they have to leave you with $300 plus or minus. I think it was $285. They were going to increase it. So let's say $300 plus or minus of your money that you get to keep in your own pocket, and you get a room at the lodge. The difference is made up by the LAP grant. Not everybody in the present day lodge is paying what the rate is. The LAP grant helps make it up. The new lodge is exactly the same. So anybody can afford it, fill out your taxes. And I think you've heard that from AAFC and CSS, Family, Community and Support Services, AA. That is their number one thing, is help your seniors fill out their income tax. It is the source of money for them. Thanks for listening to me.
So I feel like we've gone way off course on our motion to reconsider this resolution. I think we're being asked to just look at whether we want to reconsider spending the money before we have approval from the province. And if that is the question, then I'm not going to support it. I think we've heard that we have a very strong likelihood of getting approval possibly this summer. And if that's the case, then I think we let it ride and let our initial resolution stand.
Just for clarification, the median market rent that I referenced is pulled from page 12 of that paper pro forma document that was provided at the Wayland Housing Management Body board meeting that I was invited to stay for after the meeting with the Alberta Seniors Housing representatives. That's where I pulled it from. Any other questions or comments? Call the question. You bet.
So to be plain, we're voting to reconsider the motion. And if it's a positive vote, we get to talk about the motion.
That's correct. The motion is lost. We'll move to agenda item 2.32, notice of motion regarding WHMB funding.
Reading the motion to record, we voted for and we voted against.
I believe Councillor Lowerson and Councillor Kester voted in favor of reconsidering Resolution 2024-0419. Deputy Reeve Clausen, Reeve Link, Councillor Eichert, Councillor Bigger, and Councillor Laprise were opposed. Question to administration. The second notice of motion was regarding making the payment.
Through the chair, yes, that is correct. So on page 45 is the notice of motion to make that payment. Obviously, this would contradict the last motion that already stands. So council probably should, consider that as well. you'd have two motions contradicting each other if this one passes. So just a point.
Councillor Kester, do you wish to make the motion that you provided the second notice of motion regarding?
I don't see the point of having a second notice of motion. Can I just withdraw it? Okay. Last motion that we voted on is still there. When we get AHPP, hopefully it's the 14 million. Meets all the conditions, fine. I would like to have a new motion that the county provides a letter of support without conditions. Can I do that at this time? Being
So
that we're kind of on the same topic and everything else, bring conclusion to this whole thing. We need a letter of support. I'm willing to not argue the point on the 1.4 million after talking to the ministers. I think it's achievable. If I have to trade off a letter of support for a Class A, I'll go for the letter of support.
So we have a motion that's already approved a letter of support. So we would need, if Councillor Kester wanted the conditions removed, I might suggest that the Housing Board look at the conditions first, but from a Wheatland County Council perspective, that would need to be a motion to reconsider. It would need to be somebody on the prevailing side, and it would need to be done by notice of motion.
That's correct. Yes. So
Do you have all of that information, Councillor Kester?
You couldn't do it that motion today, but
And I already did a call for notice of motion. So you could bring a notice of motion to the next council meeting.
I can't do it now.
We don't even have all of the information. It would need to be done by somebody who voted on the prevailing side of the original motion. I don't, unless you have something
Everybody voted
prepared.
for it.
I don't have that information. Sorry.
I think it would be best to bring the exact motion. You need the exact wording of the motion. It would need to be brought by somebody who was on the prevailing side. And we already did a call for notice of motion at the beginning of the meeting. So even though it's related, I think it would be best to bring it forward at a future council meeting.
If I may, this wasn't even on the agenda for this, to be clear. I guess it could have been added at the front, but fine, we're not there. I would like to see an actual letter from the Housing Board requesting that, not just, I realize you're the chair, but there's other people there. It'd be nice to have an official letter to reconsider the letter of support, because I'm assuming you're going to be going to the town as well. So I'd like to see that.
Procedure question to administration. Do we need a motion to withdraw, or the Councillor Kester just stated he was withdrawing the motion for the payment?
If Councillor Kester does make that motion or just a statement to withdraw, that's fine. The question hasn't been called, or the motion hasn't even been read in yet.
Councillor Kester.
Move, this is a motion from our board meeting. Made a motion for WHMB board to request an unconditional letter of support from all municipalities.
Point of order, Councillor Kester.
I'm answering Scott's.
But I think that would be to come forward at a future council meeting, just because this isn't on our agenda for today.
He made a comment and I'd like to answer it. Made a motion for WHMB board to request an unconditional letter of support from all municipalities for the proposed new lodge hospice project, as informed by the Executive Director of Housing Operations. In order to reapply for the HPP grant application, all municipalities must be in full support of the project.
So I think from a process perspective, it would be good if a complete notice of motion administration can assist. We have that form that we can use, and that can be brought forward to the next council meeting. And then complete information is provided to all of council, and we know what we are discussing. Let's move to agenda item 2.32. I didn't know if we wanted to just wrap up the housing board because it's a related, but we can break if people would prefer. We can absolutely.
I have to have a break.
You would like a break? We can break for 5 minutes. We will reconvene at 10:47. Good morning, everybody. We'll call the meeting back to order and move to agenda item 2.32.
Good morning, Council. Brian from Administration. On page 48 of your agenda package, is this the follow-up to the previous council meeting? There was a motion to table the Wheatland Housing Management Body Funding Request follow-up report until the May 21st, 2024 council meeting. So this was provided to the previous council meeting. So just tabled it for now. I'm not sure if council does have further discussion on it. Council did just discuss the parameters of this in the last discussion item, kind of at length. So if council doesn't have any further comments on this, I'll just leave this report as is. Thank you very much.
Any questions regarding the RFD?
I'll move that council accept the Wheatland Housing Management Body funding request follow-up as report as information.
Thank you, Councillor Eckert. Any questions or discussion? I'll call the question. Motion is carried. We'll move to agenda item 2.41.
Good morning, Council. Brian again from Administration. On page 58 of your agenda package is the Council Resolution Tracker. The resolution tracker starts on page 61. Anything in yellow is deemed ongoing. Anything in green is deemed complete. If there are any questions about the resolution tracker, please let me know. Thank you.
Any questions for administration?
Excuse me, I'll make the motion that council accept the council resolution tracker dated May 21, 2024 as information. And I saw there's quite a few things accomplished, so very good. Thank you.
Any questions or discussion? I'll call the question. Motion is carried. We'll move to agenda item 2.42.
Yes, good morning, Council again. On page 69 of your agenda package is the 2023 annual report. The annual report is included in the package and it starts on page 72. The main item of the annual report is the financial statement that were audited and completed on April 2nd, I believe. So that has been included, and there's a message from the CAO and the Reeve. Just other general information about the county as well. If there's any questions about the annual report, if you see any errors or omissions, please let me know. Thank you.
Thank you, CAO Henderson. Any questions? Council's wishes.
I'll move that council approve the 2023 annual report as presented and direct administration to publish and distribute the report for information. I found no errors in it.
That's excellent. Thank you, Councillor Laprise. Any questions or discussion? I'll call the question. Motion is carried. We'll move to agenda item 2.43.
Yes, Council, on page 107 of your agenda package is a request to attend the EOEP courses on regional partnerships and corporate planning. So this was a request that was put forward by Councillor Laprise, and just as per policy 5.1.1, this needs to be approved for to be made prior to attending the course. And we put a little brief summary of the courses in here as well, and that's on page 110 and 111. If there's any questions about this RFD, please let me know. Thank you.
Thank you, CAO Henderson. Any questions? Council's wishes.
I'll move that council approves the registration cost totaling $590 plus GST for Councillor Laprise to attend the virtual EOEP course on regional partnerships and collaboration on May 29th, June 5th, and June 12th, and the municipal cooperative planning and financial course on October 9th, 16th, 23rd, and 30th of 2024.
Thank you, Councillor Bigger. Any questions or discussion? I'll call the question. Motion is carried. We'll move to agenda item 2.44.
Yes, Council. On page 112 of your agenda package is the elected officials remuneration policy 5.1.1. So at the May 7th, 2024 council meeting, the council reviewed the policy in depth and did have a number of edits to the policy that when it was presented. So administration did take this back, and we also included a table of the relevant concerns or questions that were brought forward at that council meeting. The table can be found on page 115 of your agenda package. So at this point, what we did was that because the policy was considered by council, what we did was we removed any deletions in red after that council meeting and added any new additions in green. Just to make it very clear from what council reviewed at the May 7th council meeting to the May 21st council meeting. And there was also a question about the retro payment and the number of board meetings as well that council did attend or could attend without further coming back to council for approval. So administration did review that video, and we felt that we were pretty confident that council did agree to approve 12 board meetings and 12 subcommittee meetings. However, if council did not see it that way, administration did add some language into the RFD as well that council may consider, and that is just any other language that council would deem appropriate. So administration felt like we did our best job summarizing the changes that council had and just putting them into the policy, and that policy does start on page 116. Just as a reminder to council as well is that we did update the policy with the proposed policy template. So if council does approve this policy and has no issues with the policy template as is, just kind of the new heading, administration's intention is to update the rest of our policies to look like this, just so it has a congruent look throughout all the policies. We wouldn't bring that back to council as that's not a change to the policy, but just more of a clerical amendment that we're going to make. If there's any questions about policy 5.1.1, which starts on page 116, please let administration know. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions regarding the updated policy? Councillor Kester.
Just curious about when you age out, is there any, can't see.
120.
Yes, so through the chair, we did try to put this one in. So respect to the aging out comment. So under benefits, we did have something in here about RSP contributions, but what we did put in here under the green section is if a counselor is no longer eligible for RSP contributions, counselor will be eligible to contribute a maximum of $3,500 annually towards an investment account. This contribution is optional and will be matched by the county. So we felt like that change was covered, and that was summarized in the table as well. Thank you.
Sorry, it was there in green in front of my face.
Any other questions regarding the policy? I just have one small point on page 117, just the lettering for under the reeve shall. Just missing, just need to flip it back to CDE. And then on page 120, sorry, bottom of 119, top of 120. My preference would be 12 per diems total for subcommittee work for each appointed board or committee that council appoints a member to, rather than for each subcommittee. It's a nuanced issue or nuanced difference, but to me, it's a cost control caveat. So you could have a board that could create 4 subcommittees that each have 12 subcommittee meetings a year, and it could get expensive for Wheatland County ratepayers. There may be a good return on that expense, but I would rather it be a total of 12 subcommittee meetings. So say you had, a couple of personnel committee meetings to review a contract and do a performance appraisal. Say you had a policy committee that meets 3 times a year. Say you have I have no idea, audit and finance committee that meets quarterly. You could still do all of those within the 12 subcommittees, but it would limit having, say, 48 subcommittee meetings. It's my preference. So I don't know if administration would just need a minute. It's not really captured, I don't think, in either of the language.
Just through the reeve, would this be kind of this wording itself in the RFD? So a maximum of 12 per diems per board or committee, including annual general meetings, will be provided to each elected official per term as determined at the annual organization.
Oh,
Additionally,
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, perfect. Yes.
Administration's intent was just to capture the wording of each one, just in case, because that was one point we as administration thought we may have understood, but we did know that it wasn't a unanimous item from council, so we thought we'd just provide the wording of each one, just in case, so council could pick. Thank you.
Councillor Kester.
I see the danger of this, depending on the committee you're on and your position in the committee. A council's trying to micromanage on what committees you can be on and not on. It's not as a board decision anymore. I would 12 subcommittee meetings of a certain category, I would be better. I'll take housing, for instance. There is, if you happen to be the chair, there's right now building committee, which is probably not going to be so much of anymore. There is finance committee, personnel committee, union negotiations, and the list goes on and on. If you're just a board member and doesn't elect to be on any committees, then that's fine. That can be all averaged out. But there's 3 representatives there. I look at it as micromanaging the board.
Thank you, Councillor Kester. Deputy Reeve Clausen.
I'm losing my voice. I sit on a board that we had a ramping up recently of for a subcommittee, and the way I look at it is 12 is good. If I got to go more, I can ask. And I can also, you can still go, you just won't get paid for it. There's lots of things that we do. We do get a substantial per diem as well. So I don't have a problem with it. Because I can also, like, if it's more than that, when you have a board meeting plus a subcommittee, it can, I can't see there's too many instances that it's going to be necessary. One, Energy from Waste right now, we just got redirected to see and interview a bunch of new suppliers, and we're having meetings every Friday. I'm not going to charge for all of them because I know it's just too much, but it's something that I said I would do. So that's my own choice, that people can do what they want.
I guess I think that 12 board meetings and 12 subcommittee meetings is a good compromise. Sort of meets in between the two scenarios.
Any other questions or discussion? Yeah, and I think that's a great way of looking at it. For me, it is a compromise. I know I made my position known before, but my preference is for council to do the appointment to the main committee or board, and then for interest in additional subcommittee work to come back for council. I think this does strike a good balance between streamlining the process so that organizational meetings can still flow pretty freely, but and there may be instances where more extensive subcommittee work is fully endorsed by council. And this doesn't preclude that. It just brings it back so that council is aware and can make the approval by council resolution. Any other questions or discussion? Councillor Laverson.
I think the wording should stay the way it is.
Do you want to expand on your rationale?
Where it says additionally, each elected official is entitled to a separate allowance of up to 12 per diems for each subcommittee they are appointed to. It leaves that decision of who's on what boards up to the board that we sit on.
Thank you, Councillor Laverson. Any other questions or discussion? Council's wishes.
I'll move that council approve amendments to policy 5.1.1, elected officials remuneration, effective May 21st, 2024, with the approved 4% COLA increase as recommended by the Council Compensation Committee, effective November 1st, 2023. And also with the correction of the lettering on page 117 under the Reeve shall, and with on page 19 to use the terminology as provided in the RFD, that not for each subcommittee but for all subcommittees.
So as presented at the top of page 113. We'll just give administration a minute to get the motion on the screen. Is everybody clear on the motion? Any questions or discussion? The top of page 113, bottom of page 119, yeah. Any further questions or discussion? I'll call the question. Motion is carried. Thank you to administration for your work on the updated policy. We'll move to agenda item 2.47.
Yes,
Or
good
sorry,
morning.
2.45.
Yes, good morning, Council. Brian from administration again. There was a request from Councillor Larson following the public presentation committee on May 14th regarding the STARS funding amount. So the STARS, during the public presentation committee, as council may recall, STARS had asked for a donation of $20,000 per annual, or an annual $20,000 donation from the county. So Wheatland County Administration did present a report to council in 2023 and just summarized the contributions from other neighboring municipalities. Wheatland County Administration did update this table after the public presentation committee, and the results of that table are on page 125 at the bottom of that page for council's information. And the overall difference between the two funding amounts is also found on page 126, which is $2,524 a year. If there's any questions about this report, please let me know. Thank you.
Any questions regarding the report?
When I just first started thinking about this, I wondered whether municipalities' main role is to fund organizations like this. It seems like it's a personal donation that, but I did see that it's a small change in what our typical donation is, and so for that reason, I'll support it. I do want to start thinking more about our operational costs and trying to reduce where we can. So, but I guess in this case, I'll support this motion.
Yeah, I would echo your comments, and that's certainly been a part of historic debate on the matter. There's certainly been an appetite for ratepayers to make these donations directly, with obviously also having the benefit then of a donation receipt for tax purposes as well, which we, obviously it doesn't work that way if we're making a contribution, and certainly been a debate around council chambers. But I do agree with you that it is a nominal change from the existing agreed upon contribution.
I've had similar discussions with ratepayers that have brought to me, and I was surprised that they would prefer that they make that donations themselves and leave it in their hands. But we have done this in the past, and I understand it, because if we had to provide this service on our own, it just wouldn't happen. And I have been on the ground as a volunteer firefighter in my past life and have seen this in action, and it's a very worthwhile service. It's very expensive to run helicopters. It's a very expensive operation. They do have some private sector funding that they get as well. And it is an amazing service. When I hear how well they qualify themselves and train, it's top notch. I do want it to come back to council every year, though. I do not want to have a standing motion. That's just me, because I think every council should be aware what the funds are going for, because it is kind of out of the norm. So.
Any other questions or discussion?
I just want to say how impressed I was with their tracking, that they can track our ratepayers if they were had an incident in another province.
One more thing I would like to point out, thank you for saying about tracking. There's a First Nations that utilizes a vast majority of these calls in their area, and I do not believe that they contribute to this. And I think that would be something, I'd like to see them do that. I think that'd be as a partnership, because it is a service to them as well. It's to everybody. So, and I'd realize their funding formulas may be different, but if they could allocate it somehow that, because the federal government is responsible for their funding, maybe they should be responsible to pay some of STARS, would be a good idea. I don't know how
That's
that works
a
politics wise, but
matter between STARS and the nation.
maybe they do, I don't know. But
leadership.
last year I asked it, I don't believe there was any funding. So.
Any other questions or discussion? Council's wishes. Councillor Laverson.
I'll move that Wheatland County revise its donation model for stars from a per capita ratio to a consistent rate of $20,000 per annum.
Thank you, Councillor Laverson. Any further discussion or questions? Deputy Reeve Clausen.
Does consistent rate mean that it will just be on the books and it doesn't come back to every council?
At this point, administration, or through the chair, at this point, administration's view would be that council does review it on an annual basis and it just comes at the annual budget. However, this year would be 20 and we probably leave it at 20 until a future council or this council says different. Thank
So
you.
it'll be identified at budget time. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, every expenditure, unless we enter into a memorandum of understanding or some kind of contract for service, could be reviewed at the budget. Can still be reviewed if you have a contract or an MOU, just there could be repercussions to breaking a contract. Any other questions or discussion? I'll call the question. Motion is carried. We'll move to agenda item 2.46.
Morning, Council. Joel here from administration. Just to talk through some housekeeping items regarding our reserves and a policy update. So if you'll recall, at the Committee of the Whole meeting last week, there was some discussions around the proposed changes. I'll just kind of quickly review what's being proposed here. I'll go down to our schedule where we've highlighted the changes and just kind of briefly touch base on what's been identified. Sorry. Hopefully nobody's going to get motion sick with that. Okay, so there was approximately, I think, 4 or 5 proposed changes to be made. One of the key ones here was the repurposing of line 34 to an abandoned structures reserve. Now, what we've done here is just a small change from the Committee of the Whole presentation. There was some questions around, some good comments, I should say, on ensuring that this reserve is used for county-owned property specifically. So we had identified that and just kind of making this green bolded section, adding some wording around there just to make it more explicit. In terms of everything else here, it's kind of remained the same as what was presented at Committee of the Whole, just a change from repurposing that historic reserve to the abandoned structures reserve. In terms of the table itself, there hasn't been any other changes. Line 35 for the gravel reclamation, there was just a small proposal to add the wording and the gravel levy, as you can see under the funding sources, just so that we're explicitly transferring that gravel levy that's collected into the reserves and have the ability to do that. And then adding these 2 additional new reserves for the Wheatland Wind Community Benefit and the Solar Community Benefit as well. The RFT package had some other supplemental information that there was some request in at the Committee of the Whole meeting as well to hopefully address some of the questions around those grant programs. And then finally, the only other kind of small change was in the policy itself. Sorry, I'll scroll up. And it just had to do with the interest allocation. And just adding the clause here, unless otherwise noted, as excluded from interest for given reserves, just giving administration and council the flexibility to create a reserve and not have interest imputed on it. That concludes my presentation. Staff are available for any questions.
Thank you. Any questions?
I will make the motion that council approves amendments to the financial reserves policy 2.9.
Thank you, Deputy Reeve Clausen. Any questions or discussion?
I just want to say again how glad I am that to be able to tell residents that we're doing something proactive to try to raise some funds to mitigate some of these problem properties in our hamlets. And so I'm super glad about that. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other questions or discussion? I'll call the question. Motion is carried. We'll move to agenda item 2.47.
Good morning, Council.
Morning.
Just one housekeeping item. Sorry, through the chair. On page 128, there is a second resolution that council may consider. And just wondering if council may consider that one as well. Thank you. Sorry for cutting everyone off.
Nope, my apologies. That was an oversight on my part. Council's wishes regarding resolution 2.
I'll make the motion that council approves transferring the cumulative unused grant balances of $6,000 to the Wheatland Wind Community Benefit and $1,000.83 to the Solar Community Benefit Reserves.
Thank you, Councillor Laprise, and thank you to administration for keeping us on track. Any questions or discussion? I'll call the question. Motion is carried. Now we can move to 247.
Taylor Felt with the county's Planning and Development Services team, here to present a subdivision time extension request for SD 2023-006 for council's consideration. The Municipal Planning Commission approved this application on June 13th, 2023, which proposed to create a 2-acre parcel with a 3-acre remainder at 56 Durham Drive within the Origin Business Park. In accordance with the Municipal Government Act, applicants have 1 year from the date of approval to satisfy the conditions of approval prior to the county endorsing the registration at the Land Titles Office. With the endorsement expiration coming up here on June 13th, the applicant has requested a 6-month extension as they continue to work towards satisfying their conditions of approval, which can be found on page 159 of the agenda package. And I also have them up on the screen here. With the spring weather upon us, the applicants anticipate that they'll be able to fulfill condition number 4 here, which requires the construction of a drainage swale in accordance with the overall master drainage plan for the area. In accordance with section 657, subsection 6 of the MGA, administration is recommending that council approve this subdivision time extension request. And that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions regarding the report?
So the other outstanding item was the outstanding taxes. They also are confident that they can do that in the time extension.
Through the chair, they had paid the taxes in 2023, and we're hopeful that they'd meet condition 4 in that time as well. However, now that we're in the new year, they will have to make sure that they're settled on the roll in advance.
Any other questions? Council's wishes.
I'll move the council extend the endorsement expiration for subdivision application SD 2023-006 from June 13th, 2024 to December 13th, 2024.
Thank you, Councillor Eichert. Any discussion? I'll call the question. Motion is carried. We'll move to agenda item 3.1. We have some great reports from Marigold Library regarding the county value of your investment and value of your investment for the libraries, as well as the annual report and notes to council. Also a SEWA correspondence update and a letter from the Minister of Municipal Affairs granting the time extension for intermunicipal agreements with the town of Strathmore. So that's good news. Council's wishes regarding correspondence.
I'll move that council accepts the following items as information as provided in the request for decision. Marigold Library and SEWA and Municipal Affairs correspondence.
Thank you, Councillor Bigger. Any questions or discussion? I'll call the question. Motion is carried. We'll move to agenda item 4. I will move us into closed session. I'll call the question. Motion is carried. My apologies. I will move us out of closed session. I'll call the question. Motion is carried. We have multiple motions arising.
I'll move that council directs administration to engage with the landowners within Redland to propose the water servicing plan as presented to the May 21st, 2024 report to council.
Now, just a question. Sorry. I think administration was going to bring back the final terms for council consideration prior to engaging. Am I recalling correctly?
The first motion's still good.
I think before engaging, we just want council to approve any proposed servicing plan prior to that engagement. So perhaps if we, Councillor
I'll
Kester.
withdraw my motion.
Okay, or even would you consider a motion directing administration to bring proposed water servicing plan to council for approval?
I think resolution number 2 is, that one, is it not?
I don't think we want to provide the servicing until after
Sorry.
council has approved the plan and we've engaged.
Got it.
And there may be revisions potentially based on the community feedback.
I'll move that staff bring a recommendation to council for Redland water servicing.
Perfect. Thank you, Councillor Kester. We'll just give administration a moment. Any questions or discussion on the motion? I'll call the question. Motion is carried. And then just a question, and again, I might be recalling incorrectly. Was the request for proposals going to come to council prior to actioning the sale of the lands for Lakes and Muirfield?
Yes, it would come to council first.
So then the motion to proceed with selling, should that maybe just follow council's approval of the process?
To the Reeve Council, I think that's vague enough that the steps that were discussed in council for getting legal counsel review, approval, all of that would work for all the steps required prior to putting it up for actual sale.
Okay, perfect. As long as we have clarity on that.
With that, I'll move that council directs administration to proceed with selling the remaining county-owned lands within the Lakes of Muirfield community as discussed in camera today.
Thank you, Deputy Reeve Clausen. Any questions or discussion on the motion? I'll call the question. Motion is carried. And then just a question about the third motion. I don't want to slow down the process at all. If we're not do we need to accept or approve the draft or just provide the feedback?
Through the chair, just provide the feedback that was provided, and we'll just provide that to the administrative committee.
Okay, perfect. Council's wishes.
Move that council direct administration to provide feedback to the ICC administrative team on the draft Strathmore IDP dated May 7th, 2024, as discussed in camera.
Thank you, Councillor Eckert. Any questions or discussion?
Thank you for all your hard work.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll call the question. Motion is carried. And yes, just to reiterate Deputy Reeves Clausen's comments, thank you to both Wheatland County administrative teams and the town of Strathmore for the committed collaboration on the ICC draft for the IDP. Thank you very much. I believe that brings us to the conclusion of our agenda. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.